The tiger cub was caught in a wire snare. Its small body hung twisted at the edge of a tea field, one paw pulled high and bleeding, each shallow breath leaving a whimper in the still air. The scent of rust and blood mixed with wet soil. Arun heard the cry before he saw it. He pushed through the low shrubs, heart pounding, until the clearing opened before him. The cub was no bigger than a farm dog, its stripes sharp against the mud, its eyes wide with pain and confusion. The wire coiled around a young sapling, drawn tight like a cruel bow. Every tremor of the cub's leg made the line bite deeper. He looked to the trees. Nothing. The silence was thick, watching. He knew what that meant. The mother could be close. Still he stepped forward. His voice was soft, steady. "Easy, little one." The cub hissed weakly, paw twitching, too tired to fight. Arun dropped his pack and knelt. He worked quickly, knowing one wrong sound could summon the tigress, one wrong movement could make the cub panic and tear itself further open. He pressed his palm against the ground to steady himself. The wire was tight, its end twisted around the bent sapling. Arun sawed through the base with his machete, breath held. The branch snapped back with a sharp whip, and the cub fell onto its side with a cry. The loop still clamped around its leg. Blood slicked his gloves as he reached for his pliers and loosened the twist. Bit by bit the tension gave. The wire fell away. The cub tried to stand but collapsed, panting, trembling. He cleaned the wound, poured iodine, and wrapped it with gauze torn from his own shirt. For a moment the cub simply stared at him, chest rising, eyes blinking slow. Then it made a low sound, almost a sigh, and turned its head toward the forest. That was when the world went silent. A rustle. Then two golden eyes appeared in the shadows. The tigress stepped from the trees. She was enormous, shoulders thick, fur streaked with mud and rain. Her gaze locked on the cub, then shifted to him. Arun didn't move. The machete lay beside him, forgotten. He knew running would be useless. He stayed low, his hands open. The tigress padded forward. She bent her head and breathed over the cub, inspecting the wound. The cub whimpered softly and reached toward her chest. The tigress turned her head toward Arun, her eyes narrow, measuring. Then, without a sound, she lifted the cub by the scruff and stepped back into the green. Arun exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. The forest swallowed the stripes until nothing remained but the smell of rain and blood. But just before she vanished, the cub twisted its head and looked back at him. That single glance lingered in his mind for months. In that moment, Arun knew he'd see them again. Weeks passed and the monsoon returned. The hills grew thick with mist, and the tea pickers came later each day, their baskets heavy with wet leaves. Arun worked his usual patrol, clearing snares, fixing boundary markers, marking trees with red tape. But every time he reached that ridge he found himself slowing down. One morning, by the stream that split the tea fields from the forest, he saw them. The tigress stood half-hidden behind the bamboo, her fur golden under the weak sun. Beside her, the cub, now taller, stronger, its limp barely noticeable. A faint pale scar crossed the foreleg where the snare had been. Neither moved for several seconds. Arun stood knee-deep in the water, heart in his throat. The tigress lowered her head, took a slow drink, and then looked at him again. Her eyes weren't wild now, just aware. The cub followed her lead, clumsy but calm. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, they turned and slipped into the trees. Arun stood long after they were gone, watching the surface of the stream settle. He didn't tell anyone at the ranger station. Some things he thought didn't belong in reports. But something about that meeting stayed with him. The silence, the calm, the unspoken recognition. It felt like a promise unfinished. Months later, another storm came. The heaviest of the season. Arun and a young ranger were out checking traps when the hillside gave way. The ground tore open beneath them, a roar of water and mud sending them tumbling down the ravine. When it stopped, everything was brown and broken. His partner lay half-buried, ankle twisted badly, radio smashed. The rain hadn't slowed. The river beside them foamed white, too loud to shout over. They crawled beneath an uprooted tree, soaked and shaking. Arun pressed a hand to the younger man's shoulder. "Stay awake. We'll move when it eases." But the storm didn't ease. Hours passed. The forest turned black. The flashlight died. Then, somewhere above them, something breathed. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Arun froze. His first thought was bear, until he heard a familiar sound. Not a growl, not a roar. A soft chuff. He turned his head toward the slope. Two eyes glimmered in the dark. The tigress stood there, rain glistening on her fur. Behind her, another shape moved, larger than before, broader through the chest. The cub. Full-grown now. For a heartbeat, none of them moved. Then the tigress looked down the slope toward the river, and her head turned slightly upriver, following the line of a raised embankment Arun hadn't seen before, a natural ledge that might lead to higher ground. She looked back at him once, then in that same direction again. He understood. He lifted the younger ranger, slung his arm over his shoulder, and began to climb toward the ledge. The ground was slick, the path uncertain, but each time he faltered, the tigress paused, waiting just far enough ahead that he could see her silhouette against the rain. The younger tiger followed, restless but quiet. The ledge curved upward toward a faint light on the ridge, the ranger cabin. The climb felt endless, every step burning, but they made it. Arun pushed the door open, laid his partner inside, and called for help over the backup radio. When he looked back outside, the slope was empty. Only paw prints marked the wet clay. That night, as he sat beside the fire, he couldn't shake the thought. She hadn't just appeared by chance. She'd led them home. 2 years passed. The valley healed, the rains grew lighter, and the tea fields shimmered in the heat. Arun walked the same boundary line one morning, following habit more than duty. The stream ran low, and the air smelled of grass and dust. He paused where the bamboo bent low over the water, the same place he'd seen them last. He crouched, brushing his hand through the mud. There was nothing at first. Then he saw it, a single fresh paw print, pressed deep and round, the edges still wet. He straightened slowly, scanning the trees. The forest was still. No movement, no sound, just the whisper of bamboo rubbing together in the wind. And then, faint and low, it came again, that soft, familiar chuff. He didn't move, didn't speak. The sound faded into the green, leaving only the murmur of water and the rustle of leaves. Arun smiled. He didn't need to see her this time to know. She was there, watching. He turned toward the trail and began the slow walk home. Behind him, the bamboo swayed once, then settled, hiding the last trace of movement. And somewhere deep in the jungle, unseen but near, the echo of that sound followed him. The quiet, wordless call of a bond that had never been broken.